Hi, this is Scott from SaaS Startup Stories, and today's show is sponsored by ActiveCampaign, the world's #1 email marketing and automation platform and the system that I use to run my entire business. If you'd like to get started with ActiveCampaign and take advantage of the best current promo they're running, then go to scottdudley.com/AC and fill out the form. And today, my special guest is Maddy Agrawal. Maddy has been on the show before, and he's back to share some new insights. He's based in Switzerland, and he's the founder at Startup to Scale Up, where he helps high-performing B2B and SaaS startup founders grow faster and sell more. He also publishes articles on revenueinsideout.com for SaaS founders about increasing revenue and also growing faster. Maddy, you ready to rock and roll?
Always, Scott.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's good to have you back. All right, so for those that haven't heard the other episode that we did, maybe if you just go over your background and what initially got you interested in working with SaaS.
Yeah, so I never started thinking about would be working in sales or SaaS for that matter. I was a robotics engineer long time ago. I call it my past life now. But somehow I ended up working with the European Commission to consult Volkswagen and Rolls-Royce on their lean product development. Ended up starting my PhD in Swiss Federal Institute of Technology here in Switzerland on product market fit, expansion of small, medium-sized companies internationally as a general topic. At the same time, I started my own startup as a side project, but then it kind of took off. And once it took off, it was very hard to do PhD and high quality PhD as well as the startup together because we were already 5-10 people at the time and so on. And so at the end of the day, we decided to quit the PhD end of second year. My professor became my angel investor, and that started my startup journey, which was a SaaS startup. And during last 10, 12 years, I founded several companies. Some of them obviously didn't work out. Some of them grew to 200 plus employees and so on. But during that journey is where we realized that, hey, sales is a bigger issue than product development for us. And it was very hard, even when we had money, to find people who can work at relatively early stage startups and can help us grow and scale and sell and so on. So what ended up happening is me thinking like, okay, if we cannot find somebody, then I have to become that person. And that started a journey. And with different startups, we had different markets in Europe, in US, in San Francisco, in Boston, and so on. Got great mentors, advisors along the way. And it was a very tough and painful learning curve. Did every mistake in the book possible to now know what not to do, first of all, and then of course the success in the later startup reflected that we figured out what to do, and it's especially tough during the early and mid stages of the startups because it's like you are building the road and you're driving and trying to reach the destination at the same time. Yeah. And it's just not possible for most people to do that. There are great drivers, there are great road builders, but building the road and driving at the same time and keeping the high speed, that's a spatial skill. That's what I realize.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how I ended up now here after selling our last company back in 2019.
Yeah. All right. So you've got a wealth of experience, and the main theme of today's episode is to do with sales cycles. So let's start off, I guess, by defining what is a sales cycle and why it's important.
Right. So the sales cycle, I would define it post lead gen, but before signing the deal. So the time period when you get a client on the call, or what we call in SaaS a demo call, to the point where he signs a deal with you or he make a payment or something like that. And I would even, so sometimes there is a component of trial or POC in the sales, and we can combine that in part of our sales cycle. So we can say sales cycle, and when you end up having the final deal, or you can define the sales cycle up to the point where you sign the POC, and then you say, okay, it's more about customer success, and if they actually see the results, why wouldn't they continue? Both are valid points, but at the same time, I would not define the sales cycle from the first email that you send, outbound email that you send to a prospect. I would define that's more like, for me, is a lead gen cycle. And from first outbound email, for example, or first ad click, for example, to a demo call, and then from demo call to POC, or to the final, the yearly contract and whatnot. That would be the sales cycle. Now, why is it important? Is especially in SaaS. Okay, put it this way: 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when you buy a software, you actually do the full payment of the software, and then you start using it. Yes. So now the things are reversed. You invest as a founder heavily on the software in the beginning. You have all the sales cost at the beginning, but your revenue is coming in installments, which means this is a cash flow problem more than a sales problem when it comes to product development, sales, and so on, because you're not getting even your cost of acquiring a customer immediately. Forget about the product development cost. And that is why the sales cycles becomes very critical, because the longer your sales cycle is, the worse your cash flow situation is, which means you can invest less and less and grow faster and faster.
Yeah. All right. So with that in mind, how do you reduce the sales cycle length?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, let's define closing. So as I said, the sales cycle start with somebody booking a demo or having a demo, and it starts with closing. Now, there are different ways we can look at the closing depending on what kind of sale we are making. So one type of sale is where there is one decision maker and it's a simple decision to make. So for example, if you want to buy Canva as a single decision maker and not for the whole company, then it's a simple deal because the prices are low, the risk is low, there is no real integration needed for you to start using it. You can start using it right away, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what I call triple S, single and simple sales. And that's if you need to have a demo calls or whatever, one-to-one interaction with your customer in these kind of sales, then it's heavily reliant on the quality of the demo. However, there are other kind of sales where there are multiple decision makers, or the decision is complex. It involves more cost, more integration, more team members' involvement. It depends on other people's involvement in the company for it to be successful. And it can be even simply more a risk for the decision maker because it's critical systems, or there are other parts of the business that gets directly or indirectly affected by using your product. And in those kind of sales, what the two factors that defines, because it's not a single or even 2 or 3 call sales cycles, there are usually somewhere on average between 4 to 10 or 4 to 20 call sales cycle. Then the two things that becomes very important and critical from the 30,000 feet point of view is your pipeline management and is step-by-step advancing. So on every call, you're advancing the sale and not just having a nice conversation.
Yeah, okay.
Right, so these are the two primary factors that affects the sale. Do you have any more question? Otherwise, we can continue talking about pipeline management and advancing.
Yeah, all right. Let's talk a little bit about the pipeline management. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
So again, in pipeline management, there are two primary things that that affects the sales cycles the most. And I'm following a bit of an 80-20 rule, because 80% of the things we do have a 20% effect, while 20% of the things can have 80% effect. So I'm going to focus more in this conversation on 20% things that have 80% effect on your sales cycle. So so when it comes to pipeline management, there are two things that affects the most. One is, how do you define your steps in your pipeline? And the second thing is how hard or how easy it is for a prospect to enter a pipeline versus leaving the pipeline. What I mean by that. So a very typical error most companies do is when they're defining their steps in the sales pipeline, is that they define the steps based on their actions. So we send the proposal, we send the pricing, we send the contract, rather than focusing on the buyer's journey and see, okay, so if the person is moving forward in their buying journey, what did they need to do? So they need to, for example, book a demo call. They need to attend a demo call. They need to ask for a proposal. They need to send the contract to their lawyer. They need to bring in their CTO to discuss integrations, right? So the more we can define our sales pipeline stages based on what they need to do is better, simply because on one side, if you're defining it that way, there is no room for how do we feel, or did we move forward in the sales cycle, but they didn't move forward in the buying cycle confusion. Then it also sales rep independent in the company, because then if the client is doing something and only then they're moving forward in the sales cycle or in the pipeline, that makes whatever pipeline you have at the company level consistent across the reps. It's not like one rep is moving forward people faster because he's just sending proposal like flyers, while the other rep is more cognizant and he get punished because he has less people in the pipeline.
Yeah, I see. So it's a bit of a mindset. So, it's almost like a sales funnel, isn't it? You got to look at it like a funnel.
Yes, and my question is, does the sales funnel depends on what you do, or the sales funnel depends on what a prospect do?
Yeah.
And sales funnel simply becomes a inverse transposition of what a prospect does.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right? So it's the same thing when represented as a pipeline, but your goal as a salesperson is not to do more activities, is to make sure the prospect is moving forward in their pipeline, in their buying journey, sorry. Yeah. And you cannot do that if your whole metrics and definitions of where a customer is in your sales. So it almost doesn't matter where the customer is in your sales pipeline. All it matters is where they are in their buying journey. So why not to just use that and create your pipeline rather than having two floating reference points of where they are in their buying journey and where they are in my sales pipeline? Why can't we just combine them and say our sales pipeline is simply about where they are in their buying journey?
Yeah. Makes sense.
So that's one thing about pipeline management. And the second thing is, sometimes companies have make it too easy for a prospect to enter a sales pipeline and make it too hard for them to exit, which at the end of the day give this bloated perception that our sales pipeline is full, but we are not closing. So what I mean by that, an example would be, we send a cold email to a prospect. I'm exaggerating a bit here, but when we send a cold email to a prospect, this prospect is already in our pipeline. This prospect never picked up our last 100 calls in last 6 months, but the prospect is still in the pipeline. So that's an example of how we can sometimes make it too easy for prospects to get into pipeline and too hard to exit. While in ideal case scenario, if I'm a salesperson and I'm not responsible for lead gen, I'm going to focus 80% of the time on the companies that are in pipeline. And my metric should not be what am I able to do or what the activities I'm doing, but how many sales I'm closing every month. That means if I have less prospects in the pipeline, so the prospect in my pipeline are the one which should be there today, so that I can focus 100% of them and close more deals while creating more pressure on the lead gen guys. That's the best position I want to be in. I don't want a million prospects in my pipeline because I don't have time in my days. Or then when that happens, I start to focus on, and this is a very human thing, I start to focus on efficiency rather than effectiveness, because I have to remember and manage and research and contact so many people that are in my pipeline, and everybody is promising.
Yeah.
So the minute you start focusing on efficiency rather than effectiveness, your close rate is going to go down by definition.
Yes.
And it's going to be frustrating for everybody in the whole chain within the company. So rather than that, it should be a little harder for people to come into the pipeline when they're really qualified, when they really book a demo or something tangible they have done. And at the same time, if somebody is not responding, put it in outside the pipeline. Put it like, okay, not responding. And then create a task saying, okay, contact them back in 2 months.
Yeah.
Or call them back in 2 months. They should not be in your active pipeline.
Yeah.
So this is the pipeline management, what I was talking about, 20% thing that have 80% results.
Yeah. Okay, so what tools or software would you recommend for managing sales cycles?
So before we go in the tools, let me touch upon the second topic I initiated about advancing.
Right, okay. Yep.
That if the sales cycle is 20 phone calls or 20 meetings, then we should be making sure that each call is advancing towards the sale and not just having a nice conversation, having a nice coffee, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And what typically happens is when we do this pipeline management based on what we are supposed to do, we want to speed things up. So what we do is we send the proposal and so on and so forth as soon as possible, even when the client didn't ask for it. And then all our follow-ups becomes, are you ready to buy yet? Are you ready to buy yet? And that kind of creates a perception that I just want your money.
Yes.
I don't want to do anything else with you. Yeah. And your biggest competitor is not only competitors, but also they doing nothing. So all in all combined, you end up having a lot of opportunities in your pipeline. People stop responding because they see you have nothing to add anymore because you already send them a proposal, you already give them a demo, so what to talk about, and so on. So advance is, so put it this way. In each call, they should be moving slightly forward in their buying cycle.
Right.
Or buying process. And just like we buy anything, there is a certain amount of energy we spend when we are buying something, time or energy. Time is less relevant than energy when we are actually advancing in our buying process. So if we, for example, go to a shop to buy a shirt, right? So first we do window shopping, then we go inside. That's another level of energy. Then we choose a few shirts to shortlist a few shirts, and that's another layer and energy we do. Then we go in the trial room and try those shirts out. That's another level of energy. And here, irrespective of what the salesperson is doing, that's purely our energy spent. And if we don't do that, if we don't go to the trial room, for example, if we don't shortlist the shirts, then we are at the same place in the buying journey when we entered the shop. So we browse around and we leave. Salesperson can do whatever they want. So it all comes down to the energy and the progress. And this is where the call planning comes into play, where instead of winging it, instead of saying, okay, are you ready to buy yet kind of follow-ups. If we can do pre-call planning where we say, okay, why should this prospect see me on this call? What is the point of having this call? Why does he care about it? And then most importantly, what I want him to do. What is the action or energy my client has to take? And if he doesn't take it, then I also have information that he's not moving forward in his buying process. And then, of course, one thing we should also do is how can I add value to this encounter so that customer at none of the point is thinking, or prospect none of the point is thinking that I got everything from this person. I don't need anything, so now I need to respond until we have final decision. That shouldn't be the case. They should take you as their trusted advisor. So one way I talk about this is if you're selling in this complex multi-decision environment, instead of thinking I need to close the deal, you can think from another way. Like they already hired you to help them decide what tool to use and how to use it and what process is going to be benefit for them. And if you go from that point of view, you are simply helping them as a consultant to choose the right software. If it happens to be your software, that's great. But if it doesn't happen to your software, you want to know early on.
I see.
So you can move on to other prospects and not keep on wasting time with follow-ups and so on and so forth. And that also gives a perception of long sales cycles many times. That many of your prospects are not closing, but the right ones are closing fast. But on average, it looks like you have a very long sales cycle.
Yeah, I see.
Right? So it comes down to why should a prospect see me what I want him to do? And again, what I want him to do should be specific, measurable, center on the action the prospect should be able to take that move the sale forward or move their buying journey forward and is reasonable for the prospect at this point in time, at this point in their buying journey.
Makes sense, yeah.
And typical things people do when they focus on efficiency, lack of research in advance. So the call time is wasted in asking questions they could have just done a Google search for. Which makes prospects even more value your time less and feel like you're wasting their time. And another tip at the end here is there should always be a primary advance versus backup advance. So what I mean by that is the way you ask for an advance is, hey, does it make sense that we visit your site and do an on-site evaluation? And the prospect might say, no, it doesn't make sense. But the minute he say, no, it doesn't make sense, first of all, you get the information about where they are in their buying journey. Second of all, you're just asking, does it make sense? You're not asking them, would you buy? Which means you can have a backup advance and say, hey, so typically in that case, the other prospects at this point in time do this. Does it make sense for you to do it? Could be like, let's call your chief of manufacturing to see if our software can fit into your manufacturing pipeline, how the integration is going to work. And if they say yes, you know where they are in the pipeline, in their buying journey. If they say no, you know where they are in their buying journey or how serious they are about you.
Yeah.
Because you having visited their site takes energy. They calling their chief of manufacturing to talk to you takes the energy. While just having another coffee with you doesn't take energy. It takes some time, but everybody is polite. So coming back to your question, what tools we can use for closing?
Yeah, tools or software to sort of help with that sales cycle management.
Right. So there is no specific tools for closing because, as I said, it's a very human thing to be valuable and see where they are in buying journeys. But you can use a collection of tools to understand how much energy they are putting into their buying in the steps wherever they are in their buying process. For example, And it depends on every company, every sales process, every buying process is very different. But I can give some examples. So, for example, part of the buying process is you have to send them a presentation that they have to discuss with their team, and they will not invite you in that team meeting. Like, this is not, let's say. So then instead of sending them a PDF, is it possible to send them a link to your presentation where you have the metrics back, how much time and how many times do they even look at it? Which slides do they look at it? So you get a bit of an idea that before coming to your next call, did they even look at it?
Yes.
Did they even look at it for more than 2 minutes? If they didn't look at it for more than 2 minutes, that means they never shared this with their team yet.
Yeah.
Right. And at the same time, there are tools which can, so it's the same thing. Like, for example, you have to send the contract and they have to send it to the lawyer. Instead of sending a PDF, can you send them a DocuSign with also to their lawyer? So, did it even get to the lawyer? Did the lawyer even open?
Yeah, it's important.
So most of the tools are either in the category of enablement, which are internal, or recording the calls and analyzing the calls. So you can really see, you can always come back and see where the prospect was, what exactly were they saying, what point did they say it makes sense and it doesn't make sense. And on the other side, you have two set of tools which just help you understand that what happened between the two calls. How much energy did they spend on what between the two calls? Because many times advances will happen on the customer side and you will not get to know it.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so what are your thoughts on using trigger events to reduce the sales cycle?
So trigger events are super important, but it also depends on company and the product very much. If there are trigger events that seriously, so trigger events are of multiple type, right? So one trigger event is because this event happened, the person just realized that they even have a problem. That trigger event should be part of your even prospecting. Forget about the sales cycle. Of course, it should be part of your sales cycle, but you should have a separate category of pipeline for people who are coming from that trigger event. So you know that they are at a different stage in their buying journey versus the people who are not even problem aware or doesn't feel the pain of the problem yet. Then there are trigger events which are more around, just the board asked me to do this. And sometimes there are trigger event that you can actually create in a manner of speaking during the sales cycle, because you're asking the right questions, which makes them think and realize the problem they were not even thinking about, or one of the consequences of the problem they were not even thinking about, which can bring... So it depends on what do you mean by trigger event, and there are multiple types of trigger events. And at the end of the day, it's more of a prospecting question from the external trigger event point of view than the sales cycle question. But it also happens that trigger event happens during the sales cycle, but because you're not doing enough research in advance for prospects before the call and so on, and you're half the time winging it, and you don't have this questions that you're answering yourself before every call or before planning every call, you don't even get to know about those trigger events that you may or may not be able to use to move forward your sales cycles.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. So what would you say is the biggest challenge that you believe new fans are experiencing now with growing SaaS companies?
The buyers are becoming more savvy, that's for sure. Nobody really want to talk to a salesperson. They gather much more information online, and they get really frustrated when you don't know shit about them. So they have done research on you, but you have not bothered to research them at all. and you start asking them basic questions. And the good thing is it doesn't take much because at the end of the day, there are so many SaaS companies which are so bad at selling that even a small increment in your sales and research can have a massive impact. So I'll give you an example. I was trying to buy this software and buy a subscription in one of our previous companies. And we get connected to a sales guy. He get all the, we did the qualification call. He get all the requirements and so on. And then we schedule the next call to dive into different aspects of their solutions. And I said, hey, maybe we should so I was moving faster than him in my buying journey. And I said, hey, let me bring in my tech team to go through the different details of the tech implementation. In the next call, we had a guy from another guy, and he said, oh, but it was not his territory, and this is my territory, so I took over this. I'm like, great, let's jump into the technical details. He said, yeah, but before that, let me ask you a full question. He's asking the same question which the previous guy already asked us, which took us half an hour and he had no idea about those answers and questions, right? And at that point, the deal was already done for me. Like I'm going to buy from any competitor. It doesn't matter how shitty they are. I'm not buying from you.
You've made up your mind. Yeah.
Yeah, because it just wasted.
Yes.
Because I have to bring the whole team, which was like 6-7 people at the time. Not whole team, like part of the senior team, because we were like 50 developers at the time. So I bring in the 5 developers. Now we just wasted 7 man hours.
Yeah.
For nothing.
Yes.
And I'm like, this is like almost wasting a day, and I'm not having this. And this is another thing. What happens in sales now more than often is prospects are deciding what the quality of your product is going to be, or they're perceiving the quality of the product with the quality of your sales. So sales kind of becomes the packaging of your product, and if the packaging is shitty, I presume most of the people will presume that the product quality is going to be bad.
Of course, yeah. Cool. All right, so I can't remember if I asked you this question last time or not, but it's always my favorite question. What's your favorite business book?
For closing, The Perfect Close.
Sorry?
For sure. For sales cycles and closing, The Perfect Close.
Oh, okay. Who
from
wrote that?
Muir, I think.
Oh, okay. I have to look that one up.
His last name is Muir, M-U-I-R. I don't remember his first name.
Yeah.
I think it's James Muir, but I'm not sure.
No worries. All right, cool. So just to wrap up, where can people go to find out more about Startup to Scale Up?
On startuptoscaleupnow.com, or just learn more on revenueinsideout.com. It's a free website with guides and hacks, and some of them goes in really detail, and it's very process-oriented articles there with templates and worksheets and frameworks for doing different things. So yeah, definitely check it out if you're. And yeah, definitely you can go on startuptoscaleupnow.com, and happy to have a call with you, or find me on LinkedIn and let's connect there.
Perfect. All right. Thanks for coming on the show, Maddy. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Scott. Really happy to be here.